Hogstye.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Hogstye. We are recording on Saturday, April 9th. We have how many weeks to the draft, Steve? 5 weeks?
No, it's no. It's less than that. The draft is actually coming up at the end of April. The draft is, I can open my calendar here.
Oh, it's always on my anniversary. Yeah, so it's like April 28th or something like
Yes,
that.
that's the Thursday. Yes.
Yeah.
So really have
Friday,
2.5 weeks, really.
That Friday is my anniversary. I always miss part of the draft because my freaking anniversary or my wife's birthday, which is a few days earlier. I just never can watch the draft because, those things take precedence if I want to stay married.
Yeah, if you want to stay married, yeah.
I don't think any man in the history of, anything has gotten away with, honey, I would celebrate our anniversary, but it's the second day of the draft.
I want to watch TV. I want to watch round 5 of the draft.
Yeah, I need to know who the special teams guys are going to be. All right, hey everybody, it's Alex. That's Steve. Jamal's there too. Hey Jamal, how you been? How was your week?
The week went by exceptionally fast. I'm well for the most part. Just busy per usual, man. Nothing changed on my end. Just doing all these scouting reports, trying to get things done on the football side, and then work is work. Going back into the office within a couple weeks. So, I'm anxious to get back to my daily kava lunch.
Yeah. You were right by a kava, aren't you?
I'm
that's
like
a good
probably
meal,
like a 5-minute walk. Yeah.
What is a kava exactly?
You would hate it. It's Greek food. Fast,
I'd hate that.
Casual Greek.
Yeah,
thanks.
It's
the same style as Chipotle in terms of walking in, picking your food or whatever. But it's just
that's called fast casual now. That's what they like to call it.
Fast casual. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Greek food is not up my alley.
No. A lot of food's not up your alley now, Steve.
So those of you who know me know I have this week had a serious health problem.
Yeah.
I spent a day or two in the hospital. I'm not going to get into the specific details here because I don't want to bring the show down. But the reason, what I wanted to say, I guess, is that the reason why they caught this is I went and got a physical.
Yeah.
An annual physical. I certainly didn't expect to end up in the hospital, but that's sort of typically what happens out of the blue. So believe me, I am most anti-physical, most anti-doctor person you will find. Excuse me, I don't like doing all that stuff. Nobody does, but I really don't.
No.
But if I hadn't gone, it could have been way more serious in terms of immediate kind of thing. So I just encourage everybody to go get a physical and don't be afraid of it. And I certainly never will be again.
Yeah. And look, I was in that same boat for a lot of years where I just hated going to doctors, getting physicals, all that stuff. And I finally did it after my dad passed last year.
Yeah.
And, same thing. They're like, you have high cholesterol, you have sleep apnea. Here's all the things you need to change in your life. And, at some point when you become, as we get older, we have to make all those changes if we want to, keep going.
And the days of me eating fast casual are over, permanently.
Yeah, and for those who know Steve and have listened to the show, we all know you do love your
that's
the kind of food you love.
Yeah. No more Taco Bell, unfortunately.
No more Taco Bell, no more
Taco Bell. You can't go to the microwave for your first meal. None of that stuff. You gotta get that organic food that says is good for your soul.
Yeah, I know, and that's tough, man. What's good for my soul is Taco Bell.
Yeah, Steve, we can actually, I might make some suggestions after the show of ways that I know you don't like to cook, but there are things out there that you could start looking.
Yeah,
into.
After the show, let's not turn this into the cooking hour.
No. I know that's your least favorite thing to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, why don't we get into it this week, guys? It's been a quiet week for Washington. Like the only
quiet couple weeks.
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of off the field stuff.
Yeah.
This week, the off the field stuff is relatively minor. There are some updates to, the stories that are ongoing, but I don't think they've made any real big moves to the team. When we were searching for what to talk about, we did find out they let somebody go who I didn't even know was on the roster.
DJ Hayden.
Yeah.
If you've been paying attention to my roster updates, you would know that DJ Hayden was on the roster. Only Mr. and Mrs. Hayden knew that, except if you looked at my roster.
Right. And I hadn't looked at that in a while because the way I saw it, this site's like Washington releases former first round pick. And I'm like, oh, did we release like Deron Payne for some stupid reason that I didn't catch yesterday? But no, it's DJ Hayden, who I guess was a first round pick at one point.
By the way, I mean, this chart I have,
the
one that
your chart is ridiculous.
It's now I'm on up to column AS on Excel on this thing.
Yeah.
Meaning, if you know Excel, it starts with A, goes through Z, and then starts again. I'm now through AS because I keep adding stuff to this. Yeah, I keep adding stuff to this thing. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's just crazy.
Steve has like columns for the parents' maiden names and all that stuff at this
shoe size.
How many brothers and sisters they have.
At some point, I'll get to that probably.
Steve's master list.
But there's so many other things I can keep adding to it. That's the thing.
Oh yeah. We could add sillier and sillier columns if we really wanted, and it would be
because I don't even publish half of them. It's just for because I'm a glutton for punishment.
Yeah, you are a bit of a glutton, especially when it comes to spreadsheets.
I finally added average annual value to this thing as a goal. Right. So now I have that for everybody. That's exciting. Yeah. I didn't publish the number, but
no. I almost feel like we need to create like a different type of web page for it. It's just so big.
That's why I try to delete all this stuff because it's too big already.
Yeah, it doesn't fit on our website anymore in its normal format. Like we almost should just make it a Google Doc and like create a redirect link to the Google Doc.
Maybe, yeah, because the roster chart fits fine.
Right.
But the financial stuff is like,
it's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. You put sidetracked to shame with the amount of detail you put there.
Well, the thing is, I grabbed all this data from a bunch of different sources, not just them. Spotrack has some of it, but they're not up to date on all of it, and sometimes there's a few mistakes. So if you can kind of combine, if you really focus on one team, over the cap is good. There's a couple other things you can really get down to like the real exact numbers. So aside from when I have an error in the chart somewhere, I think our numbers are closer and more accurate than Spotrack probably usually.
Yeah.
But the difference is they have sources and people leak contracts to them. That's how they get their info, which I'm relying on someone else to do.
Oh, yeah. And look, I think those sites are great if you're looking at the whole league, because as much as you love doing this team, Steve, I don't think you could ever do the whole league on your own.
No. It would be a full-time job.
Yeah, and I know the guys who run those sites, it is their full-time job at this point.
Yeah, and we're just here goofing off. I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. That's a little, segue out of what we were going to talk about. So this week we're going to change up the order a little. We're going to start with our draft preview, folks. It's wide receivers this week. And this was written by our buddy Dave Earl, who he broke down wide receivers. I edited it this time because of Steve being out for his health issues. So if you read the column and it's not as good as most of ours when it comes to the writing, that's because I kind of just was like, all right, if I can see the bad grammar, I change it. Steve catches everything. I can catch maybe some of it. I'm not a great writer myself. That's why I do radio and audio and video.
I edit a lot of Alex's writing.
Yes, Steve edits my writing. Steve edits everybody's writing.
Yeah.
But by Steve's standards, we're all terrible writers.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. But regardless, Dave did a pretty good job breaking down all the receivers. He has 1, 2, 3, 4, like 20 guys on here. It's insane. But why don't we just start going through them? I think we're probably going to focus on the round one, right, guys? Because there's a very good chance Washington goes receiver in the first round this year.
I mean, it seems like it, but on the other hand, Ron Rivera has not drafted used either one of his first round picks so far with Washington on offense.
No, but maybe that means he's due. Like
I mean, I've always, like I said earlier, I mean, I still think middle linebacker is the biggest need.
Right.
You know, so I wouldn't be unhappy if they went into linebacker either. Although I question the concept of whether they're willing to draft another linebacker after the failure of Jamin Davis.
Yeah. There's there is like a PR angle there too, isn't there? Yeah, well, let's just start with these first round guys. Jameson Williams is the first name he's got on his list, coming off an ACL. He had a strong year. I'm trying to read what Dave wrote, and it's not a lot of detail in here. But basically, he thinks Williams is the number one receiver in this class, even with that injury. I worry about getting a receiver with an ACL, guys. I don't know about you.
Absolutely, I think that's definitely his downside, and is ACL. And I personally, I don't know if I'd be willing to do it or not. And the other thing is, I mean, if you just, I realize the critics love him, and I don't know if Jamal has studied the film on him yet or not. But
no, I know who Jamal's guy is.
I
Jamal
know.
won't
I
stop
kind of
posting
agree
about his guy.
I kind of agree with Jamal on it. 6'1", 180 about.
Yeah.
I mean, he kind of fits the same mold of every other receiver Washington has, not named Cam Sims.
Right.
So a big part of me says they may need to break that mold.
Yeah, and I get that part too.
So,
go ahead, Jamal.
I mean, but Jameson is also, he's dealing with that ACL injury too. So that's kind of like one of those deterrents from an early round first round selection. So like if you're looking at a Jameson Williams, he's still a first round talent like that. Don't let the ACL let people think that his value is going to drop outside of the first round. But you looking at a guy who's probably went from being a top 12 pick to maybe like somewhere in the late teens, like 17 on back. Like that's kind of where you are in terms of getting the value for Jameson. So I personally think while he's an option for most receiver needy teams, he's probably going to ideally work on a team who has multiple first round picks, because there's quite a few teams out there. So that's probably where he ends up going, is to a team who can afford to take Jameson and they still have another first round selection to go with.
Yeah, because there's a little risk there for sure. That makes sense. All right, next up we got Traylon Burks out of Arkansas, who's a big receiver. He's almost got that light tight end frame, 6'3", 225. That's a big body, man. He had a good year, over 1,000 yards last year, 11 touchdowns. So he could definitely be another one of these. If we're looking for somebody who's different than what we got, that's something different than what we have on this roster right now, right? I mean, someone that size.
Yeah. I mean, he's a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
He's a little bit bigger, has speed, has size. That's a combination. Really, though, I mean, what I have come to realize about NFL wide receivers in the draft is this. I think the physical measurements of a wide receiver and the athletic numbers are far less important than three things. Number one, hands.
Yeah.
If you can't catch anything, it doesn't matter. And there's been a slew of burners, most of them with the Raiders, that are really fast, can't catch a damn thing. That you're not helping me there. You're probably hurting me. Two, route running. There are so many college receivers who get by on athletic skill set alone, and the corners aren't that good in many cases, and so they don't need to be precise route runners. In the NFL, you do, and if you can't do that, it's a negative. And the three, the tangible ability to get open. Those three things to me are more important than numbers, speed, any of that. And so to me, the trick is of this group, well, who is the guy with the hands who can run routes and get open?
Yeah.
And can Traylon Burks do that? I don't know. I haven't watched this film.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think this is a strong receiver class. Multiple guys are going to be able to probably come out of this, kind of like the Terry McLaurin class, where you have, 4 or 5 really good receivers who came out of that group. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is another draft class like that one was.
By the way, you want to hear Ron Rivera's draft history at Carolina?
Sure.
Not names, but so it been between 2011 2019. Carolina drafted 5 defensive players, 4 offensive players, and the offense was Cam Newton was one,
Sure,
and 2 wide receivers, and then Christian McCaffrey, whatever you want to call him.
So offensive weapons, basically.
Understanding though that Ron wasn't the GM there,
right?
Like he is here, so he's not in charge. But that's what he did at Carolina.
Yeah, but I'd like to point out that one of our 5 GMs that we have, because they have this weird, like, they have 100 GMs that they've hired to be
GM by committee.
Yeah, GM by, but a lot of these guys were with him there, so.
But Washington doesn't have a real GM. Ron Rivera is the real GM. He's in charge. They work for him.
It's not Martin. It's Ron.
Yes.
Or Martin. Yeah.
Marty,
right,
Martin.
Martin,
the
Martin,
M's.
and Rivera. Yes. All right, Jamal. The next guy's your guy. Do you want to talk him up?
Drake London.
Well, I can go ahead and speak on the
all right, so
Drake London wrote, and then we can talk about him.
Drake London is a huge dude, 6'4", 219. He looks gigantic when you watch his film. I would almost question if he's more than 219 pounds, to be honest. But that's what Dave has him listed at. He's another guy has speed, size. He's sort of a classic 50-50 ball, receiver type of guy.
Right.
He's played outside. He's played inside. I love the guy. I don't think I've studied the film as much as Jamal has, because I know Jamal has. But to me, and he doesn't have any health issues that I'm aware of. He's sort of the complete package. Dave has a note here that says his weakness is run blocking. I mean, I could live with that if he could do everything else. So
he is a wide receiver. That
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of these big guys tend to not have burst, just because their legs are so long. So you can't necessarily expect them to be, Will Fuller or somebody. But to me, this might be the guy. What do you think, Jamal?
Well, Drake is in my top 3. He's one of my top 3 receivers in this class. Jameson being one of the other in the 3. We'll get to the third shortly, but Drake he's everything that this offense would need in terms of how the roster is constructed right now. And when we go from top to bottom, I'll start with the weakness part first, since that was the one thing mentioned. He said run blocking. Drake is an individual who he's very active in the run game. He's a person who's willing. He occupies defenders. But I think what hurts him, because they even use him in line too. Like they'll motion him into like an H-back situation where he's in the box, but his technique isn't always the same. Like he'll lunge with his helmet or just lunge at a defender at times, and that can kind of make things dangerous in terms of how he protects himself, but also just the technique too, because if he's whiffing, he's going to miss the defender obviously. On the outside though, he's physical. He'll put his hands out there and get inside the defender's frame and block, but it's not sustained to the length in which you'll like it. But either way, I agree. That is one of his weaknesses as a run blocker. But when you talk about the other things, downfield. So here's the crux of this whole thing. Like a lot of people think that like he's when you think of 6'4", 6'5" receivers, you put these guys like in that automatic box of, oh, he's just a big guy who like if he's one of the best prospects coming out in this particular draft, then he must be good because he can out jump you, or he can win contested catch situations all the time. And Drake London
is what you're talking about, right? Someone like that.
I mean, not just him. Like it's others. Calvin Johnson was a guy who won a lot of contested catches. And I mean, obviously he had speed too, but I'm just saying, like, there's a Mike Evans, like all these guys, Mike Williams and Clemson. What's his name? The guy that I used to love. Played with Iowa State, and Hakeem Grant or something like that. Hakeem Butler, sorry. But back to the point, Drake London is a different athlete, man. He's an athletic guy. He has a lot of bend. He has a lot of body control. He knows how to run his routes. He's a smart player. He has different ways to attack a defender in man and zone coverages. He has the acceleration at the line of scrimmage to really threaten defenders, but also he has moves. Like he has setup moves, and he has the shake. So it's hard to really get hands on him, but he has the play strength if you do get hands on him to get him off you, to get him off of him. So when people talk about he's a guy who can't separate, I think what they're doing is they're lumping a lot of things into one box. I mean, to one category with Drake London. There's multiple ways you can separate, and then there's also release packages that he has that kind of makes it harder for you to even know what he's doing. But in terms of separation, the only thing that kind of really hurts him is his foot speed. Like he's not the fastest guy. So what that means is, like, when people talk about separation, you have to know all the other aspects of being able to separate. And from an athletic style, he can do it. From a mental processing side, in terms of knowing how to attack a coverage, he can do it. From a play strength style, he's physical enough to get you off him at the catch point. But what'll hurt him is the part that he doesn't have the foot speed. So what that means is, like, at the break point, like if he's running a post and he's running like a 7-yard or 10-yard stem, and then he's breaking towards that the two goal posts in the middle, he won't have the foot speed to separate from the defender, which then comes into the part where he's an elite player at the catch point. Like he's not going to physically separate from that in terms of just a foot speed, foot race type of thing. But that's just one aspect of him being able to separate, and that's one aspect that kind of hurts him. Outside of that, he has other ways. He has a lot of things in his toolbox. So I just think that when you talk about what he can and can't do for your team, he can work as the Z. He can work as your slot man. He can work all areas of the field on your offense. But being able to work that short and intermediate areas, he's as competitive as it gets. He's good after the catch, really good after the catch. He's elusive for his size, 6'4". Like, you don't really see people move like him at that size. So it's going to be interesting seeing where he goes. He's been projected at times to be like a top 10 guy, but if he falls to 11, it's going to be hard to pass up on Drake London.
Yeah, so I agree with most of what Jamal is saying here, and I'd only point out a couple things. He didn't run at the combine, but his 40 time is supposedly in the 4.5 range. But there's different types of.
So one thing, yeah, because he fractured his ankle. Because I remember you spoke about injuries, you wasn't sure. So he fractured his ankle, I think like week 8 of last year. So his combine, he wasn't able to run, but he is planning to host his own personal pro day on April 15th. So in 6 days, we'll know, some numbers for Steve. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's supposedly in the 4.5 range. But again, I mean, Jamal kind of pointed this out. He's so tall that these tall guys, unless they're just hyper freaks, don't have the burst off the line that some of the short guys do. But I'd point out he's got good numbers. He's USC, in case we didn't mention this before. 88 receptions last year, over 1,000 yards. USC was not a good team. They didn't have good quarterbacks. They didn't have good offensive line play, and he was kind of the man at USC. But I think it's worthwhile pointing out that he might have room to grow in an NFL system with a decent quarterback. Whether Washington has that quarterback, we'll see with Carson Wentz. But I think this is a guy that was only going to improve.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you mentioned that burst thing, and I think any fan of this team has flashbacks to Josh Doxson, who was the last real risk they took on a big wide receiver for this roster. And he clearly never had that burst.
Josh Doxson is exactly what I was talking about earlier. It's the guy, had the physical measurements. Mm-hmm. He didn't really want to play football. It didn't look like to me. He didn't have good skills as a wide receiver. And it's wonderful. You can run fast. Great.
Yeah.
But who cares?
Yeah, that thing with Josh Doxson and when people, not you, because I know you're not on Twitter, so this ain't to you, but the people who compare him to compare London to Doxson, I think the difference is like there's vastly different and notably different skill sets between the two. And then secondly, we got to remember, we knew in the moment that they drafted Josh Doxson in 2016, We drafted him because he was able to win in the red zone as a contested catch guy, as a jump, a high leaping, high vertical type of player. So it wasn't nothing else that we broke down with his game. We didn't talk about his route running ability. We didn't talk about how he was able to separate at the line. We didn't talk about any other thing outside of the fact that he was going to be the guy who's going to be a red zone threat moving forward in this offense. So we knew initially that we had a role for him. Everything else is what ended up failing him, because if you can't win in between the 20s, then it's not going to be that good for you in terms of your career.
Oh yeah. I think
and Doxson, listen, he's out of the NFL basically already.
Yep.
He the last team he really played for was the Vikings. He signed with the Jets in 2020, opted out during the coronavirus pandemic, and he spent 5 minutes with the Cardinals, on the practice squad. So he's basically out. And so this is what I'm saying about these receivers. I just don't think it's a wise idea. It's particularly for receivers to get hooked too much on numbers. It's who knows how to play the position. It's a very hard position to adjust to. The Terry McLaurins of the world are rare. The Tyreek Hills, and I'm not talking about him personally. And personally, he's a scumbag. But from an athletic standpoint, the guys who can both run and play the position at a high level, very rare. I would much rather have a guy who can play the position. Jerry Rice, perfect, and perfect. The statistically the best receiver ever. He ran like a 4.6.
Yeah.
He's not fast in any way, not by NFL standards, but yet
he wasn't particularly big by NFL standards.
No, he wasn't.
Yeah.
But he's so good with his hands, with his route running ability to get open, that it didn't matter, and he crushed everybody anyway.
Yeah. Jerry Rice. I mean, like, that is an interesting.
Well, look at Art Monk. Our guy is Art Monk.
Yeah, of course.
Art is the same way. Art wasn't fast.
No. Although Art was bigger, I felt like.
Well, yeah, he's bigger for sure, especially for back then.
Yeah.
But the guy really knew how to play the wide receiver position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he wanted to be here because, to me, Josh Doxson was kind of the modern day Michael Westbrook, in kind of attitude wise. And I don't think to get back to Drake London, I don't think Drake London is like that. He seems like he really wants to play football, and so I think he'd be, if he's there at 11, I think they ought to consider him.
Yeah. Oh, I think, if he's there, you definitely should. I mean, most of these guys, honestly, I'm fine with him taking any of these top wide receivers because, to me, it is one of our big positions of need at this point. All right. The last two first-round picks, like I said, we're focusing a lot on the first-rounders here, folks. Both of them, the Ohio State guys, of course. We'll start with Wilson, who, you look at his game, very different from Drake London's. This guy, he's really great at yards after catch. Watching any highlights of him, they're just fun to watch because he's usually just bobbing and weaving through crowds of defenders. That's the fun thing with him. So what are your guys' thoughts on Wilson? I do know both Olave and Wilson have been big focuses of this front office. Well, I think the Terry McLaurin ties, he's probably making a push there for these guys. And they've both been brought in for workouts.
And I'll say that Lance Zierlein has Garrett Wilson as his top-rated guy. And Lance Zierlein is someone I respect in terms of his ability to evaluate players. So here's Wilson. You said his height, 6'1", 180.
Yeah.
Sub 4.4 40-yard dash, 36-inch vertical leap. Broad jump over 12 feet, or 10 feet. So he's very athletic. Yeah. He put up 7 receptions, over 1,000 yards. So he's got all of that. Very, profile-wise, very similar to Terry McLaurin.
Right.
Really and truly. But he's another guy that supposedly has it all. Here's what Zierlein said: lacking in polish.
Interesting.
Yeah. Some scouts believe his play strength and run after the catch ability make him a more valuable draft commodity than Chris Olave, who we'll get to. But the lacking in polish thing makes me a little bit nervous because, again, I think what you want is who can play the game. Mm-hmm. Jamal, have you watched this film?
Garrett Wilson was the third guy.
He's your number three?
Okay. Yeah, he was the third guy in my top three. So indirectly, thank you. Move.
Dakota disagreed with you,
indirectly,
apparently.
I'm good. So indirectly, I watched him because I was actually watching Olave in the moment, but Wilson, he popped off the screen when he got his opportunities, and I think one of the things that Garrett Wilson like stands out is first off his ability at the catch point, just simply throwing the ball to him. He has a like the vertical ability to attack it. Like he has a radius that's kind of not suspecting, given that he's like 5'11" or 6 feet or something like
Yeah,
that. Like
he's a smallish guy for
yeah, like he jumps and it makes it look like he's a 6'7" receiver. Like it's kind of crazy his vertical and stuff like that, but also his speed too. His speed was kind of underrated coming into the combine, I believe. I didn't do too much research on terms of like opinions, but I do know like from a soft researching point, a lot of people didn't expect him to run that 4.3. And he blew it out the water. So that's how he ends up becoming like a top 12 projection and stuff like that. But from a route running standpoint, he has some skill sets. He's similar to Olave in that regard. He's shifty and stuff like that. But after the catch is kind of what separates. Excuse me. It's kind of what separates Olave and Wilson. Wilson is much more dangerous after the catch. He can make people miss at the line of scrimmage. He can take a curl route or a slant route 60 yards to the house. Olave can't really do that.
No.
And I think that's kind of what separates those two and make things a little bit more easier in terms of my selection is when you talk about a guy who can do the route running stuff, who can threaten you with their acceleration and their foot speed, who has elite foot speed. You kind of open up it makes it easier. So like for me, it comes down to at 11. For me, it comes down to either Drake London or Garrett Wilson, or we're trading back. I'm talking about just receiver wise, like if Kyle Hamilton's there, or Derek Stingley or any defensive option, that's one thing. But if we're talking about offense and we're talking about receivers, I'm only going Drake London or Garrett Wilson at 11. Otherwise, I'll entertain a trade back option.
I kind of wonder if Ron Rivera prefers the smaller guys, because he seemed to have a real problem with playing Cam Sims last year, even though they were paying him a decent amount of money. Everybody else on Washington's roster is roughly 6 foot or under. I mean, if you want to count Kelvin Harmon, who was barely on the roster, okay, bigger. But in terms of the guys who played, McLaurin, Humphreys, he brought in Samuels, who was a bust, but his size. Cam Sims the only guy really who was on the active roster who was bigger. And so it makes me wonder if that's just who he prefers for his offensive system.
It could be that. It could be smaller guys tend to be more agile, have a little bit more speed. It could have to do with Humphreys is not a good example of that. I don't think he's particularly quick.
Humphreys is a jag.
Yeah. But maybe he prefers guys who can get more yards after catch that way. And that's what he's valuing. I don't know. It's scheme. We don't really know what their ideal scheme was with Heineke. They had to kind of change a lot. So, I think it's a fair point. I'll say this about Wilson. I think he will be, if you brought him in, I think it would be a tough call who you put in the slot versus outside between him and Samuel. But because I would love to see what damage he could do from a slot position.
It sounded like Jamal was about to disagree with you.
Yeah.
No, I don't. All right, so there's two things because I was going to start with Cam Sims, and I'll be quick with that one. I don't know, because it was weird. 2020, Cam had a lot of opportunities, but it wasn't, by design. I think some people got hurt. He ultimately became number 2. And he stood out in that position. I don't remember who the number 2 guy was to Terry before somebody got hurt. I don't remember. But point being, he had his opportunities. But when 2021 came around, it's kind of weird that he got phased out because even with injuries, he didn't see that much time on the field from a snap count perspective. So I don't know, but I also think it may just be a Cam Sims thing. But for him to come back, it's kind of clearly showing that he likes his position here. But with that being said, Garrett Wilson slot works. I don't know. I think if anything, if it's not Slide, it'll probably be Z, off-ball receiver they can just move around in motion, because it's gonna be weird with Curtis Samuel coming back, knowing what they have in store for him, and the position that they see for him is working in that slot position. So it's not impossible to have two receivers, especially when you go four wide, to have two receivers in the slot, or even have both of them on the field at the same time. It's not going to be hard, but like, where do you want the focus to be in terms of both of them? Like, what do you want the focus to be? I don't know. And that's going to be an interesting dilemma, but it's not going to be hard to figure out packages where everybody can be on the field at one point, meaning Terry, Curtis, and Garrett.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I think a lot of this depends on whether Curtis Samuel can actually be a football player or not.
Right.
And
to
how
answer
can
your question, Jamal, the 2020 other starter, I think, was Steve Sims at first.
Steve
Sims.
So maybe Cam was the guy then, and I just forgot. I don't remember, because I don't think Steve would be eating up Cam Sims' time. So he may have just
very
been the
different
starter.
Players.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and Cam is bounced around a bit, between the practice squad, and he spent a brief time on that. I don't know. I mean, we may be reading too much into the size. Maybe this is just how it kind of worked out for him.
Right.
But there's no doubt. I mean, if you want the other guy who's got size, I should have mentioned, is Gandy Golden. But Gandy Golden, I mean, he's got a long way to go, obviously.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you want to count him. But Kelvin Harmon, 6'2", Gandy Golden, 6'4". So those are those other two. But everybody else is 6 feet or under.
Yeah.
Every single one of them.
All right, let's hop on to Chris Olave and wrap up the first round. And I think we'll probably briefly go through some of these other guys. But Olave, I'll tell you guys, like, I understand that he's probably not number one on a lot of people's lists. He is a guy who I've had an eye on for, 3 years. He's always stood out pretty well whenever I'd watch Ohio State highlights and things like that. He's kind of been that guy that I've just always been like, I could see him working. I could see. I know he's basically just Terry McLaurin all over again in terms of playing style, but I think he's got the it factor, and he's just proven it by having played so much as a starter at Ohio State for so long, because they've had a glut of good receivers. Let's be honest.
Well, yeah, and it's hard to tell sometimes who's going to be good coming out of a school like Ohio State. To me, because yes, it's a big school. Yes, they recruit the top talent, but it's also that a lot of these schools play opponents that are drastically under their skill level for 8, 9, 10 weeks a year. And there's so many, in the case of wide receivers, there's so many receivers out there that a lot of these teams, it's not like the NFL. It's very imbalanced in college. And so a lot of them put up numbers that I don't know necessarily translate. I mean, Washington obviously scored a hit with Terry McLaurin, but I just don't. I think it's, for example, unlikely that all these guys, Wilson, Olave, are all going to be top quality NFL players. Probably not. And
No.
So I think the trick is obviously who's the better receiver. Now, of the who's the better receiver category, I think Wilson probably has the better skills. And so regardless of speed and whatnot, I would probably go with Wilson in terms of those two. Olave's another sub 4 guy, 32-inch vertical leap, so not quite as high. Broad jump about the same. 6 foot 187. Mm-hmm. But I don't think he's quite as polished as Wilson.
Polished meaning what? Because I feel like that
as much of a quality receiver.
Oh, okay.
Jamal.
Oh, all right. So, here's my. I mean, like I said, I kind of semi compared them to Garrett in the sense the route running part. Like, they have at least separation. If Wilson, if Olave is facing off coverage of any sorts, that's kind of where he'll work best because of his speed, he can work that deep level pretty well. But also he has routes where he can kind of play off of his speed and knows how to manipulate defenders, given that, he has that speed package that, not many can match in terms of keeping up with him. So those comebacks and out routes and speed outs and post, and I don't know about post corners per se, because I don't think I don't know. That's kind of like he needs a little bit more patience in terms of setting up the double moves. But all those things where he can, utilize his speed and change the direction, works really well. The thing that I have concerns with, that I really didn't put in the scouting report, is there's a couple things, and it's the reason why I think that he's a bottom 20 type of player in terms of the first round. I wouldn't select him at 11. Olave. So the concern for me is he didn't see that many press opportunities against while he was at Ohio State, and rightfully so. Like, he's very fast, but at the same time, some of the opportunities you kind of have to get a feel for it, in a sense. Like, he did okay in the opportunity that he was getting, but at the same time, his play strength is kind of what worries me. And it's like, if you're not that strong against squad defenders, and squad defenders are people who are playing like anywhere between like 5 to 10 yards off the ball, and sometimes those defenders were able to get hands on him and ultimately shut down his route. Like, he wasn't able to shake those guys. And imagine if you're playing a press defender who is like 2 to 3 yards away from you, and they're able to get hands on you. How are you going to be able to maneuver in such a short space? Like, how are you going to be able to work your releases and things like that against press coverage, people who want to jam you at the line to kind of keep you from getting downfield? That's my concern with him. And the reason why I think that you didn't see many opportunities is partly because their scheme and being able to get those guys open without having that much contact at the line of scrimmage. Like, that's a really good scheme that Ohio State has. So when you don't have many opportunities, it's okay. But at the same time, I don't know if he has the strength to, work through presses, but even work through contested catches. Like, he can catch in traffic. Like, so for me, I kind of break up contested catches and catching in traffic in two different lanes. Contested is a defender who's on your back actively trying to break up the pass. Like, how strong are you at the catch point to maintain possession? Catching in traffic, yes, that can happen. Like, you're about to take a hit, maybe. You got defenders around you, so your concentration may be somewhere else. It's not focused on catching the ball. That's kind of how I differentiate catching in traffic versus contested catches. And he can catch in traffic. He has that ability, but contested catches with defenders trying to actively break up the ball, I don't think he's that strong at the catch point. So it kind of limits his effectiveness to a degree. And that's kind of what you're going to have to work on the next level, is building up that strength, being able to play at a stronger level in the NFL. So that's kind of the reason why I say they separate Wilson and Olave, because Olave doesn't do much after the catch. He doesn't present that threat that can take something to the house, or even play in a slot position like Garrett Wilson could. It's a little bit different.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Like, I don't know. I think the thing is, like, when we talk about all of these guys in the top 5, like, in terms of how you list them, I think it's what kind of makes things difficult this year is, like, there's no bona fide number one guy. Like, when you look at the players, you don't say this guy, he's going to be a Hall of Fame type of player. Like, that's not what you get with this class. But there are people who do things well in different ways, and they have elite ability in that regard. Like, Wilson and Olave have elite, speed.
Right.
Drake London, he has good skill sets before the catch point, but he's an elite player at the catch point. Treylon Burks, he's a playmaker after the catch, but I don't know too much about him. I don't watch him, but I do know, like, he's an elite playmaker after the catch point, and he's a big body guy. Jamison Williams, elite speed. He can run routes too. So it's just kind of but it's nobody that really stands out that does everything well.
I think that's true across the board this year, honestly. I mean, the highest rated players in the draft seem to be edge rushers. What's his name? Aiden Hutchinson.
Yeah.
And the guy from LSU, Thibodeau, isn't that his name? There's guys like that. But in terms of wide receivers, quarterbacks, I think some of the fans and some of the NFL scouts are drastically overrating some of these quarterbacks. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
drastically overrating them. And
But that
their
happens
teams,
every year. We know that.
well, the teams are really going to get burned this year.
Mhm.
You know, like Malik Willis. I mean, come on. You know, he's not worthy of top 5 pick. He's not worthy of a first round pick. He's not a very good quarterback. He's got the arm. He's got all the athletic ability in the world. He seems to be a leader. But in terms of quarterback skills, ability to play the game from the pocket, how has he done that? You know, and so you have to go. He's got to go to a team, just as an example, that has patience. Well, you know, maybe doesn't need him to start right away. If he
Right.
goes to the wrong team, he's going to be a total bust. And I just, as an example, that's one guy who's going to be drafted too high. And I think Jamal's right. I mean, these receivers all have strengths and weaknesses and whatnot. They're certainly not like, you know, the next Jerry Rice is not out there. You
No.
know, that teams have identified in the draft process.
Well, and look, yeah, I mean, we all know that randomly somebody's going to get picked in like the 5th round and become a 1,000-yard receiver. That happens every
Oh,
year,
absolutely.
it seems like. But it is a crapshoot. We all just accept that. Yeah, this draft class in general, it seems like if you were to rank everything 5 stars being guys who you think have Pro Bowl Hall of Fame caliber talent, not a lot of those. A lot of 4-star guys though. This is a good draft. Like the way that you hear people talking about it, this is going to be a good deep draft outside of quarterback for like that caliber of talent. Guys who will be capable starters, who could come in right away and contribute to your team. There's probably like 50 to 100 of those. Not stars, but just good quality players. So this is an interesting class for that. And, you know, I know we had other wide receivers. We've talked enough about the first round guys. I'm not really worried about the rest of the receiver class. We wanted to kind of go over what you guys think the team should be doing in this draft. And you know, I think it's a very open-ended question that we want to discuss here. But we'll just start with, what would you do if you were, you know, GM Steve or GM Jamal? And then you know, what? So like, give me your approach to day 1, day 2. What's your goal coming out of this draft? Now that we've gone through free agency, we didn't do a whole lot other than quarterback.
Yeah, I personally, I wouldn't have traded a bunch of assets for Carson Wentz and then also eaten his salary. I probably would have just broken down and drafted a quarterback. You know, somewhere again. I mean, it maybe it wasn't in the, you know, the middle of round 1, but somewhere. But it is what it is now. And so in terms of
Right,
now,
we got to go from this point forward is what
yeah.
we're thinking.
I've always been a believer in the top of the draft in drafting for need within reason. And the reason why I say that is, and I'm not talking about drafting the guy who's ranked 40 at 11 necessarily, but I think the fans get way too hung up on mock draft rankings. Somebody's ranked 18 and oh my God, it's a horrible value if you draft him at 10. And what are you doing? BPA. That drives me crazy. Because the fact of the matter is, most teams draft, need is a factor in almost every team's draft. It's a category. So for me, what I would be looking for with Washington is, what is the biggest need here? To me, it's no question, it's middle linebacker. No question, it's middle linebacker. I mean, if you know, Ron Rivera was talking about, maybe I think it was Rivera, maybe Cole Holcomb's going to have to break down and be the middle linebacker next year.
Yeah, Rivera said that's what they're kind of thinking to do.
And so then that puts the team in a lurch in terms of strong side. Who's going to be the strong side? Don't know.
Yeah.
So to me, I think they desperately need another linebacker, and I blame Rivera for busting on Davis. I mean, Davis may end up working out his weak side, but in terms of the role he's brought here to play, it was a bust.
Right.
So I would be looking toward, and we haven't gotten to linebackers yet, free agency. So I would look to linebacker first, and then receiver probably second. And then, to be honest, I think I would be looking for offensive lineman next. You know, maybe you trade back and draft another guard, because they really need another guard.
Yeah, they could use more depth there.
Yeah,
if not a starter.
To be honest with you, well, let me let me actually ask for clarification. Alex, you're saying the approach as in the first couple rounds, or like what do you want the goal for the entire draft to be?
I mean, I think it's both those questions really, Jamal. Like what? Let's start with what is your approach to rounds day 1 and 2, rounds 1 through 3? What would your approach be?
So I do understand sometimes that we can, as fans, when you're in fan mode and in that analyst mode all the time, you can be quite drastic in terms of your approach. Like if one thing isn't working, you want to immediately go to the all the way on the far end of what wasn't working. And what I mean by that is, we drafted defense. I think like the last 5 or 6 years, dating back to Doxson, whatever. So I guess 5 years, the last 5 years, you drafted defense with your first pick. And because the defense has been poor and from an overall perspective over that time span, and you kind of, or at least mediocre, I think that was the mediocre / average. You kind of want to go straight offense moving forward because the old approach hasn't been working. But I think in this case, it kind of fits, the situation that we're in.
Jamal, did we lose you?
I think we had a sound technical problem with Jamal, perhaps. I don't know if he can hear us or not.
Yeah,
I can hear.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
You dropped out for a second.
Sorry. Keep going, Jamal.
So I'll be quick because I don't know where I left off, but I'll just say, like, in terms of drastic approaches and adjustments to what hasn't been working, it kind of fits the mold in this draft. Essentially saying, I do think that sometimes fans can be drastic, and when you're in fan mode, it can be drastic. But when you have an opportunity to build a strong roster on the offensive side of the football, and knowing that you lost some talent with the interior defensive line and Tim Settle and Matt Ioannidis, you should take that approach of trying to have the most potent offense as possible surrounding Carson Wentz to make sure that offense is as effective as possible in the offense or the play style that he has. And that means getting those receivers who can work all levels of the field and then having a decent run game. You have that with bringing Antonio and JD back together for another year. So I think that's kind of the approach in the early rounds. I need them to bolster up that offensive side of the football. But the whole outside of the first couple rounds, meaning rounds 3 through 7, just look for depth pieces, man. Like if they end up being top tier starters, okay, but you kind of have to work around the depth pieces. You need that interior offensive line to kind of get together, and then obviously the interior defensive side of the football kind of has to get stronger as well. So if you can kind of work those in between and find you a backup linebacker or a linebacker to kind of possibly become a starter in terms of your middle, then okay. But look for depth pieces because you clearly content with the approach to this point of not going all out in free agency and finding starters elsewhere. So you need to get those depth pieces and bring back and make sure those starters perform up to par.
Yeah, let me add one thing real fast, and then I'll be done. The one thing I left out of this is I'm not necessarily confident that Antonio Gibson is the answer at running back. And the reason I say that is, he had more total yardage last year, but his effectiveness went drastically down. And granted, there are reasons and all of that, but I think that he has something to prove he, no matter how many yards he gets, if he's running, 3.7 yards per carry, that's not doing the team any good, which is what he was doing last year up until the bitter end of the season. The last game drug his average up a little bit. So I think they need to draft competition at running back for Antonio Gibson, and it's like maybe a mid-round kind of thing. So I'd add that into the list.
Fellas, now this is going to be crazy, right? I hate that I saw this. So I'll just read the tweet verbatim and all right from there, man. It's all right. This is crazy just looking at it. Yeah, it's breaking news. Dwayne Haskins, a standout at Ohio State before struggling to catch on Washington and Pittsburgh in NFL, died this morning when he got hit by a car in South Florida, per his agent Cedric Saunders. Haskins would have turned 25 years old on May the 3rd.
Who is that tweet from?
Adam Schefter. I'm sorry, I should have said
Oh
it.
my God.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's not a fake account. But I say it threw me off. So yeah.
No, that's breaking news. Wow, that's terrible. I mean, unexpected, obviously.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
rest in peace, Dwayne Haskins, and certainly our condolences to his family. I mean, the football stuff doesn't matter. That's it's a unbelievable tragedy. 25 years old. That's just horrible.
Yeah, no, that's awful news.
Man, that's crazy, dog. At 25 years old, bro. I'm about to say that ain't. I think it's crazy. Like it's hard for me to even, and it's not nothing to do with the fact that, I mean, truthfully, we've known of or gotten like a similar sense of who Dwayne is as a person based on his time in Washington and stories developing about him, and a lot of the things that he did in terms of his time here. It was nothing where you said he was a despicable person or a hateable person or anything outside of that. He was just a kid and he didn't know any better. It wasn't like detrimental to him as a character. He just needed developing in terms of like being an adult. And none of that warrants, the things that just happened to him and the suffering that his family was going to go through.
No,
So it's
awful.
just rough knowing, he was just a kid, just trying to, become a better person. I don't know exactly what his motives were or anything like that, but just understanding how young he is, and he didn't have that time to figure things out and become a more professional individual, that's just the professional side. Personally, he was just a normal guy, man, with dealing with life stuff. So it's just sad, dog.
And by the way, he's only 24. Schefter was
Yeah, he's
wrong.
only
His
24.
birthday is May 3rd. So,
No, he was saying he would be 25. In May.
would be
Oh, he
25.
would be.
Okay.
Yeah, would be. 25.
Listen, I mean, I always kind of thought Washington did not do a very good job with Dwayne Haskins. I've said that before many times here. I don't think they handled him very well. I don't think the coaching staff did a good job with him. I don't think Ron Rivera did a good job with him. Not to say he would have been a success, but I don't think he ever got really much of a chance. I thought Washington could write a book on how to mismanage a highly ranked quarterback.
Yeah.
With Dwayne, and that's just a shocking tragedy. It really is.
It is a tragedy. I mean, look, 24 is way too young for anybody to go like that. And I we don't know any of the details, obviously, what happened.
I was just looking at Pro Football Talk while Jamal was talking,
Yeah.
and it doesn't say anything different. This is Florio, my buddy Florio, site, and it doesn't say anything more than what Jamal said. So we really don't know.
We're probably not going to know anything more for like a little while now.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of derails everything else we had to talk about on the show.
Yeah,
but that's
absolutely.
fine. Look, I'll just say, yeah, like I think we all have different opinions about his play on the field, and that's secondary to all that.
Absolutely.
Just terrible news. You hate to hear that about any player or any person. In Florida, everything bad happens in Florida. So
Unless you're the federal government, in which case it happens in Washington D.C.
It happens in Florida too for them. It's an amazing thing. Everyone should just leave that state. Like we should just abandon it.
I think everybody should move to Florida personally, but I think Florida is probably one of our best states. Okay, look, that's tragedy, but we're gonna finish the show here by covering what's the remainder of the Snyder ongoing scandal here real quick. We want to transition to that.
All right. Why don't we talk about just the updates there? Thank you for kind of putting us back on a little bit of task here, Steve. We talked about the testimony of Jason Friedman last week, so we don't need to cover the whole thing again. But what we do, and I know, Steve, you talked about it on the It's Just Business show, or you will be talking about it on that when people listen to that. But there were two updates that came out this week after we recorded. The first one the initial news report said that it was testimony only that Friedman had given to Congress when he testified. It came out later from AJ Perez, the guy who I think has been kind of the point man reporter, doing all the fact finding on this. No, that's not true. There was apparently some evidence handed over. We don't know what, but there was evidence given to Congress. And Congress has similarly been giving all this stuff over the NFL, it sounds like. I don't know if they give them the evidence, but Congress seems to be working hand in hand with the NFL quite a bit on this whole situation. And that can be shown by the fact that the NFL on Friday gave thousands of emails over to Congress and documents over to Congress, including stuff about the Beth Wilkerson investigation, stuff that they initially said they weren't going to give them. That it was Dan Snyder who had to give it to him. But my gut tells me, if I'm reading some tea leaves there, Congress is done. Or the NFL is done with Dan Snyder. They're gonna start flipping on him as best they can. If they're suddenly willing to work with Congress after saying they wouldn't, that's pretty interesting.
It's possible. I think it's a disgrace and it's shameful that Congress is doing what they're doing. Congress has no business at all, zero, looking at spending this many resources, time, committee resources into investigating
3 interns. That's
non-public, a non-public, privately held, closely owned corporation. Congress has no business into this at all. That's not to say Dan Snyder doesn't deserve it, because he does. Personally, I'm a bit skeptical of this Freeman guy because I haven't seen his evidence, whatever it was. But I think it's an absolute disgrace that Congress is involved in this.
Yeah. Oh, the other thing is we found out because you and I, Steve, were speculating what Dan Snyder could have been doing to skim money.
Yeah, we found that. We didn't know. Yeah, so the idea there is that every team has to report ticket sales because 40% of it goes to the away teams. The NFL kind of manages the process and distributes it and all that.
Right.
So the thought process here is that the allegation from Friedman, is it Friedman, whatever his name is that Washington had 2 sets of books in order to keep from handing over all of the ticket revenue from the past, however, I don't know however many seasons, but that's the allegation.
Yeah, basically skimming off the top from the rest of the league.
Yeah, and so I think it's a disgrace. In terms of Dan Snyder, I think that the NFL cares far less about the rights of the violations that have happened to these women involved, and they care far more about the finances, which is shameful in itself and sad.
Right.
But I think that's the case, and I think if you really wanted to dig out under the, drag the skeletons out of the closet, probably 32 of 32 teams have played grab ass with the secretary, would be my guess.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there was another story that multiple state AGs.
Yeah, we covered that on IJB.
Yeah.
So
saying that.
Yeah. So I think it's not surprising. You have a bunch of meatheads who've been in a locker room their whole life.
Right.
This is what happens. But in terms of the Freeman stuff, I think the NFL would care a lot more if there really is a legitimate attempt to defraud the NFL, and we don't know what it is. Again, I'm very skeptical. But if there really was, then yeah, that may be trouble for Dan, but I don't know if we're at that point yet.
Well, we don't know how much. There's a lot of stuff
maybe
we don't know.
Mistakes. I mean, how does this Freeman guy even have, the records that went to the NFL? Maybe he didn't. We don't really know. So I don't think fans should overreact just yet.
Right. Well, so he was, just so we're clear, he was like the head of their ticketing, right? Like that.
That doesn't mean he has access to reports going to the NFL. We don't know.
No. But look, if Dan is taking money from 30 other billionaires,
they'll care about that a lot.
They'll care about it. Billionaires care about money. That's one thing we all know. And I don't care. I don't think they care if it's, he took, $20, $100, $1,000.
It depends on the motivation. Again, if it's poor accounting, that's one thing. If it's an intent to intentionally defraud,
right?
Because here would be, if you want to dream up a hypothesis, Washington's ticket revenue is already way down
Right.
because nobody goes to the games. And so maybe, again, I have no evidence of this. I'm just speculating. Maybe the thought process is that the team wanted to try to retain as much revenue as it could because they don't have any in the first place. So that would be kind of where I would maybe start with a look into it if I were somebody, not Congress, because again, that's shameful, but whoever's investigating it, that's probably where I would start.
And how they're doing it, I've seen a couple different theories, one of which the teams don't have to share luxury box revenue, I believe, so they could be misreporting.
Well, it's premium ticketing, period.
Okay, so they could be underreporting the stuff they have to share with the stuff they don't have to share. So saying, hey, all these guys in the nose, well, they wouldn't do it in the nosebleeds. They would do more expensive than that. Those were all luxury box people. So, that's one way they get around, or one way you could get around it, in theory.
Well, that'd be one way if you're going to defraud somebody, like, mafia style. That's what you would do.
Yes, laundering. I don't know how laundering works. There's actually
Here's how money laundering works. So money laundering is basically you're creating a fake track record of where the money goes.
Right.
And so the good ones can create fake tracks that look real.
Right.
And the bad ones can't. And so the idea of taking some regular ticket revenue, mixing and matching with premium, I mean, that would be something that would occur to someone who was intended to do that.
So they're not actually putting money in laundry. That's not what works. That's not what laundering is.
Correct.
Yeah. So that could be interesting.
But the laundering part, by the way, is you got to make it look legit. So what typical money laundering is, it's like from a crime syndicate.
Right.
And they're trying to make, because you can't spend dirty money. And so you put it through, something that makes it look real, which is, again, the fake invoices through a legitimate business, and boom, it comes out the other side and it looks like it's real, it's legit money.
So does the term come from the fact that a lot of it was done through like dry cleaning stuff back in the day? Because I know that was a cash only business, and that was an easy way to launder money, was use cash.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Because a lot of those old school terms, that's like how they come up with them. Yeah,
it makes sense, and I've wondered that, but I don't know the history of it.
Yeah. I might Google that later. All right, we are at the end of the show. That Dwayne Haskins news, man, that's awful.
Yeah, that shook me, man. That's awful.
Yeah. So Adam said that he was down there training, I believe, with some players in South Florida. So that was why his presence. The reason why he was. Matter of fact, what did he say? Yeah, just training with some Steelers receivers and quarterbacks and running backs. So
and listen, none of you fans out there better be criticizing his time at Washington and all of that. Just remember, a man died who has a family, and I don't want to hear any nonsense from any of you guys about.
Yeah, I will go hard on deleting that stuff if I see it on our page.
Yeah, that needs to go. Yeah.
So I will. I'm actually gonna post that on our page as soon as we're done, just so folks know.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We will talk to you all next week as we count down the days to the actual draft, which we all love. We all love the draft.
Absolutely.
Yep. And I won't watch it because I'll be Southern Man next week. All right. Talk to y'all later. Bye.
Drake London.
That's a great ending.
That's how you end it.